My alarm went off at 4:58 a.m., 2 minutes before it was set. That's how my body worked these days, wired, restless, always on edge. I slipped into my leggings and tied my hair into a tight ponytail, the elastic biting into my wrist until it left a faint red line. My sneakers hit the treadmill in the basement while the rest of the house slept. Every mile felt like I was punishing myself, not training. By 6:15, I had protein shakes poured, lunch boxes lined up, and my inbox already half cleared. My children's laughter mixed with my husband's half-awake voice upstairs. I should have felt accomplished. Instead, there was a constant buzzing in my chest, like something inside me was about to break loose. At work, my team called me the machine. Always on, always smiling, always capable. They didn't see the way my hand sometimes trembled when I clicked the mouse, or how I clenched my jaw so tightly at night that it hurt to chew breakfast. I couldn't let anyone see the cracks. Perfection was the only acceptable mask. Driving home, my daughter asked me why I never played dolls with her anymore. "You're always busy, Mommy," she said, her voice light but her eyes heavy. My son chimed in, "You're always on your computer." I laughed it off, promising I'd make time tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. That night, staring at the ceiling while my husband slept soundly beside me, I realized I was suffocating. Not because my life was bad. On the contrary, I had everything I thought I wanted. But the harder I tried to hold it all together, the more it felt like my very soul was slipping away. I used to think anxiety was for other people, the ones who didn't plan well, the ones who weren't strong enough. I was the organized one, the disciplined one, the one who could juggle career, marriage, kids, workouts, and still show up smiling. Until my body began betraying me. It started small. Sleepless nights, shallow breaths, chest tightening when I looked at my calendar. Then came the afternoon I froze in a conference room, words caught in my throat, while a dozen eyes stared at me. I excused myself, locking the bathroom stall, shaking as I tried to breathe. I whispered, "Get it together." But no amount of pep talk worked anymore. I didn't want to admit it out loud, but I was losing control. Every day was a performance, and I feared that if I stopped acting, everyone would see the truth. I wasn't holding it all together. I was falling apart. If you're listening to this, maybe you've felt that same weight. Maybe you've smiled while your chest was on fire, or nodded while secretly begging for a break. This story is for you. Not a polished lesson, but the truth of how I crumbled, and how something greater than me put me back together. Before we dive deeper, can I ask you a favor? If this story speaks to you, please subscribe to this channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who might need it. And I'd love to know, drop a comment below with your city and country. Tell me where you're listening from, and which part of this story connects with you most. Because this isn't just my journey. It's about all of us, learning to see what really matters. The panic attack hit me on a Tuesday. Not during a crisis or a deadline, but while making my morning coffee. The familiar routine of measuring grounds and adding water suddenly felt impossible. My hands shook so violently I couldn't hold the scoop steady. The kitchen walls seemed to press inward, and I couldn't catch my breath no matter how hard I tried. I gripped the counter, knuckles white, watching my reflection in the toaster's chrome surface. The woman staring back looked hollow-eyed and desperate. This wasn't the composed executive who led board meetings, or the patient mother who solved her children's problems. This was someone I didn't recognize, fragile, scared, completely undone by the simple task of making coffee. My husband found me there 20 minutes later, still frozen in place. "Sarah? Honey, what's wrong?" His voice sounded distant, like he was speaking through water. I tried to explain, but the words came out in broken fragments. I don't know. Something's wrong with me. He drove me to urgent care, my hands still trembling as I filled out forms with shaky letters. The doctor, a kind woman with gentle eyes, asked about my stress levels, my sleep, my daily routine. I gave her the polished version, busy but manageable, productive, everything under control. She wasn't buying it. "When's the last time you felt truly relaxed?" she asked. I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it. I couldn't remember. Not in months, maybe longer. Every moment was scheduled, optimized, accounted for. Even my relaxation time involved reading productivity books or planning the next day's tasks. The diagnosis was anxiety disorder with panic attacks. She prescribed medication and recommended therapy, speaking in gentle tones about stress management and self-care. I nodded and smiled, already calculating how to fit these appointments into my packed schedule. Even my breakdown was becoming another item on my to-do list. That night, I sat in my perfectly organized home office, staring at the motivational quotes I'd hung on the wall. She believed she could, so she did. Strong women don't have attitudes, we have standards. Be yourself, everyone else is taken. The words felt like mockery now, empty platitudes that had nothing to do with the reality of my crumbling interior. I called my sister, something I rarely did anymore since she'd moved across the country. "I think I'm losing my mind," I whispered into the phone, afraid my family might hear. She listened without judgment as I described the panic, the constant tension, the feeling that I was drowning in my own life. "You know," she said softly, "this might be the best thing that could happen to you." I wanted to hang up. How could falling apart be good? But she continued, "Maybe this is your body's way of saying you can't keep living like this. Maybe it's time to find a different way." Her words haunted me through another sleepless night. A different way. I'd built my entire identity around being the woman who could handle everything, who never needed help, who had all the answers. What would be left if I stripped that away? The therapy appointments felt like another performance at first. I sat in Dr. Martinez's office, answering her questions with the same careful composure I used in business meetings. Yes, I was stressed. Yes, I had high expectations for myself. No, I didn't think that was necessarily a problem. Ambition had gotten me this far, hadn't it? But Dr. Martinez was patient, asking deeper questions that I couldn't deflect with corporate speak. "What would happen if you weren't perfect?" she asked during our third session. The question hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt dizzy considering it. People would see that I'm not, that I can't. They'd be disappointed. "Who are people?" she pressed. I struggled to answer. My boss, my children, my husband, society. The more I tried to identify these people, the more I realized how much of my life was being dictated by an audience that might not even exist, or at least not care as much as I imagined. She introduced me to cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, helping me identify the thought patterns that were fueling my anxiety. I must be perfect, or I'm a failure. If I'm not in control, everything will fall apart. Showing weakness means I'm letting everyone down. Seeing these beliefs written on paper made them look absurd, but feeling their power over me was another matter entirely. The medication helped with the physical symptoms, the racing heart, the trembling hands, the nights spent staring at the ceiling. But it couldn't touch the deeper issue. I had no idea who I was beneath the layers of achievement and control. I was a successful professional, a devoted mother, an organized wife, but strip away the roles and responsibilities, and I felt empty. My husband, bless him, tried to help by taking on more household duties, but instead of feeling grateful, I felt guilty and useless. If I wasn't managing everything, what was my purpose? When he folded laundry, I refolded it correctly. When he helped with homework, I double-checked the answers. I couldn't let go, even when holding on was killing me. The children began walking on eggshells around me. My daughter stopped asking me to play, sensing my underlying tension. My son started going to his father first with questions and problems. I was becoming a stranger in my own home, physically present but emotionally unavailable, too wrapped up in my internal storm to truly connect with the people I loved most. Work became both my sanctuary and my prison. In meetings, I could still perform, still be the competent professional everyone expected. But the effort required to maintain that facade was exhausting. I started avoiding social interactions, eating lunch alone, declining after-work events. My colleagues began to notice. "You seem stressed lately," one said. "Maybe you should take a vacation." A vacation. The suggestion felt foreign, almost offensive. I hadn't taken a real vacation in years, just long weekends where I brought my laptop and checked emails between family activities. The thought of truly disconnecting, of not being needed or productive, filled me with more anxiety than comfort. During one particularly difficult session, Dr. Martinez asked about my faith background. I'd grown up in the church but drifted away in college, too busy building my career to make time for Sunday services. "Do you ever pray?" she asked. I laughed bitterly. What would I pray for? To be better at juggling everything? To need less sleep? I think God helps those who help themselves. She smiled gently. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe you've been trying to be God instead of trusting Him. The words stung because they rang true. I had been trying to control everything, to be everything to everyone, to create a perfect life through sheer force of will, and it was destroying me. The lowest point came on a Saturday morning in October. I woke up to find my 7-year-old son making breakfast for himself and his little sister, cereal and toast, carefully prepared and served at our kitchen table. They were being quiet, trying not to wake me. When I appeared in the doorway, my daughter looked up with concern. "We didn't want to bother you, Mommy. Daddy said you needed rest." Something broke inside me seeing them there, taking care of each other because their mother was too fragile to handle even the most basic parental duties. I wasn't protecting them or providing for them anymore. I was the problem they were working around. The realization was devastating. I spent that day in bed, not from illness, but from a crushing sense of failure. My husband brought me tea and sat on the edge of the bed, his face etched with worry. "I don't know how to help you," he admitted. "I feel like I'm watching you disappear." His words were kind but honest, and they confirmed what I already knew. I was becoming a ghost in my own life. The following week, I made a decision that shocked everyone, including myself. I took a leave of absence from work. Not vacation days or sick leave, a real, indefinite break from the career that had defined me for over a decade. My boss was supportive but confused. "You're one of our best performers," she said. "Are you sure you can't just manage the stress better?" Manage the stress better. Those words followed me home, echoing in my mind. I'd been managing stress my entire adult life, treating it like just another skill to master. But what if stress wasn't the real problem? What if the real problem was the life I'd built that required so much managing in the first place? Without work to structure my days, I felt completely lost. I wandered through my house like a stranger, unsure what to do with myself. The silence was deafening after years of constant motion and noise. For the first time in memory, I had no deadlines, no meetings, no urgent tasks demanding my attention. The freedom should have been liberating, but it terrified me. I started walking, not the purposeful exercise routines I'd maintained for years, but aimless wandering through my neighborhood. There was something soothing about the rhythm of steps on pavement, the changing light through the trees, the simple act of moving without any destination in mind. During these walks, my mind gradually quieted, and I began to notice things I'd been too busy to see. Children playing in their yards, elderly neighbors tending their gardens, the way shadows shifted throughout the day. The world had been continuing all around me, while I'd been trapped in my bubble of productivity and control. Life was happening, beautiful and ordinary, whether I was managing it or not. One evening, passing by the small church at the end of my street, I stopped without planning to. The building was simple, unassuming, with warm light spilling from its windows and the faint sound of singing drifting into the autumn air. I hadn't been inside a church in years, but something pulled me toward those lit windows. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, listening to the hymn I dimly recognized from childhood. The voices weren't perfect. Some wavered, some were off-key. But there was something beautiful about their imperfection, their willingness to raise their voices together despite their individual limitations. It was the opposite of everything I'd been striving for, and yet it felt more real than anything in my carefully orchestrated life. I didn't go inside that night, but I carried the sound of those voices home with me. For the first time in months, I fell asleep without taking medication, the melody still playing softly in my memory. I started attending that little church, slipping into a back pew just as the service began and leaving before anyone could approach me. The pastor, a woman in her 50s with laugh lines and silver hair, spoke about grace and surrender in ways that felt revolutionary. Not the demanding, performance-based faith I remembered from childhood, but something gentler, more forgiving. God doesn't need our perfection, she said one Sunday. He needs our presence. The words hit me like lightning. I'd spent so long trying to be perfect for everyone, my family, my colleagues, myself, even God. What would it mean to simply be present instead? After the service, I sat in my car in the parking lot, crying for the first time in months. Not the frustrated tears of overwhelm I'd become accustomed to, but something deeper. Grief for the years I'd spent performing instead of living, for the relationships I'd neglected in pursuit of an impossible standard, for the woman I might have been if I hadn't been so afraid of being human. The pastor knocked on my window gently. "Are you all right, dear?" Her voice was kind, without judgment or urgency. I rolled down the window and tried to compose myself, but she stopped me. "Don't hide your tears from someone who's cried plenty of her own. Would you like to talk?" We sat on a bench in the church garden while I poured out my story. The panic attacks, the leave of absence, the feeling that I'd lost myself somewhere along the way. Pastor Rachel listened without trying to fix me or offer easy solutions. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What do you think God wants from you?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I used to think He wanted me to be good, to succeed, to take care of everyone, but I can't do that anymore." She smiled. "Maybe that's exactly where you need to be. Maybe this breaking is actually a breakthrough." She invited me to join a small group that met Wednesday evenings, women of various ages dealing with different challenges, but united in their desire to grow spiritually. I was terrified. These women would see through my facade immediately. But Pastor Rachel's gentle persistence wore down my resistance. The first meeting was awkward. 6 women sitting in a circle, sharing prayer requests and discussing a book about trusting God in difficult seasons. When it was my turn to speak, I gave the sanitized version of my struggles. "I'm just taking some time to focus on family and personal growth." The words felt hollow even as I spoke them. But as the weeks passed, I began to open up. These women shared their own stories of loss, disappointment, and struggle with remarkable honesty. Maria, a single mother working 2 jobs while caring for her elderly father. Janet, whose husband had left her after 30 years of marriage. Susan, battling cancer with quiet courage and unexpected joy. Their struggles put mine in perspective. But more importantly, their faith showed me a different way of living. They prayed for each other with genuine care, celebrated small victories together, and supported each other through setbacks without judgment. It was the first community I'd ever been part of where imperfection was not only accepted, but expected. I began reading the Bible again, not as a duty or a checkbox, but as someone genuinely searching for answers. The stories felt different now. Not moral lessons about being good, but accounts of flawed humans encountering a God who loved them anyway. David's psalm spoke to my anxiety. Job's questioning resonated with my confusion, and Jesus' words about rest for the weary felt like a personal invitation. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. I'd heard the verse countless times, but now it felt like a lifeline. I was weary, bone deep, soul deep weary. And the promise of rest wasn't just physical, but spiritual. A rest from performing, from striving, from the exhausting work of trying to be God in my own life. Prayer became less about asking for things and more about surrendering control. I can't do this anymore, became my most honest prayer. I don't know how to live differently, but I'm willing to learn. In that surrender, I found the first real peace I'd experienced in years. Learning to live differently was harder than I'd imagined. Old habits died hard, and there were days when I slipped back into my controlling patterns, trying to micromanage everyone and everything around me. But now I had tools to catch myself, to step back and ask, is this mine to control, or can I trust God with it? My relationship with my children began to heal as I learned to be present instead of perfect. Instead of hovering over their homework, I sat with them and listened to their stories about school. Instead of scheduling every moment of their free time, I let them be bored, discovering that boredom often led to creativity and independence. My daughter, now 8, surprised me one afternoon by saying, "Mommy, you're more fun now." The comment stung a little. Had I really been so joyless before? But it also filled me with hope. If she could see the change, maybe I really was becoming someone different. My husband and I started going on walks together in the evenings, something we hadn't done in years. Without the pressure of solving problems or planning the next day, we rediscovered what it meant to simply enjoy each other's company. He confessed that he'd been worried I was having a nervous breakdown. "But now," he said, "I think you were having a breakthrough." The question of returning to work loomed large. My leave couldn't last forever, and we needed my income. But the thought of returning to the same high-pressure environment that had nearly broken me felt impossible. I prayed about it constantly, asking God for wisdom and direction. The answer came through Pastor Rachel, who mentioned that the church's community outreach program needed someone to coordinate their mental health initiatives. The pay was significantly less than my corporate salary, but the work was meaningful, connecting people struggling with anxiety and depression to resources, support groups, and counseling services. My husband was concerned about the financial implications, but he could see how energized I became when talking about the possibility. "We'll figure out the money," he said. "You need to do what feeds your soul." His support meant everything, especially since I was still learning to trust my own judgment. The transition wasn't smooth. There were moments of panic about our reduced income, times when I questioned whether I was being responsible or just self-indulgent. But gradually, I began to see God's hand in the details. We found ways to cut expenses without sacrificing what truly mattered. The children adapted to a simpler lifestyle and seemed happier for it. Working in ministry felt like coming home to a version of myself I'd never known existed. My corporate skills translated well. I could organize programs and manage resources. But now those abilities served a purpose beyond personal achievement. I was helping other people find hope in their darkest moments, sharing the grace that had saved me from my own perfectionism. One of my first initiatives was starting a support group for women dealing with anxiety and perfectionism. The room filled quickly, confirming what I'd suspected. I wasn't alone in my struggle. These women, successful in their own fields, were drowning in the same expectations that had nearly destroyed me. We met weekly, sharing our stories and supporting each other through the difficult work of changing lifelong patterns. I watched women who had never shown vulnerability learn to ask for help. I saw mothers give themselves permission to be imperfect. Wives learn to set boundaries. Professionals discover their worth beyond their achievements. The group became a sacred space where masks could come off and real healing could begin. We prayed together, cried together, and celebrated small victories together. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. Everything my old life had not been. Two years later, I still struggle sometimes with the old patterns. The voice that whispers, "I'm not doing enough, being enough, achieving enough," hasn't been completely silenced. But now I recognize it for what it is. Fear masquerading as motivation. Anxiety dressed up as ambition. The difference is that I no longer face these moments alone. I have a community that loves me as I am, not as I perform. I have a faith that offers grace instead of judgment, rest instead of striving. And I have a deeper understanding of what it means to be human, beautifully, imperfectly, authentically human. My children are learning a different way of being from the one I modeled in those early years. They see their mother reading books for pleasure instead of just productivity guides. They see her saying no to commitments that would overwhelm our family. They see her praying when worried instead of trying to control everything. Most importantly, they see that it's okay to not be perfect, that love doesn't depend on performance. If you're listening to this story while struggling with your own version of perfectionism, anxiety, or the crushing weight of trying to be everything to everyone, I want you to know, you don't have to carry it all alone. There's a God who sees your efforts, understands your fears, and loves you exactly as you are right now. Not as you might become with enough improvement, but as you are in this very moment. That love is the foundation for everything else, the grace that makes real change possible. You are enough, not because you do enough, but because you are deeply, completely, unconditionally loved.